I'm Tom Vassell, and welcome to our... Well, get ready for that. That may happen for a good chunk of the show anyhow. But we are, for the Dice Tower, we're going to be doing a lot of top 10 lists in our Summer Spectacular coming up. So I wanted to kind of take a look at other things. And I looked at the calendar the other day, and it was June. I remember when March started this year, I said, oh, this is going to be long. And March was long. Then April started, and I said, man, it's going to be a long year. And now it's June, and it feels like April was like last week. Time has lost all meaning. To that end, since we're 6 months out of 2019, I thought this would be a good chance for us to go back and take a look at 2019, to take a look at the different things going on during that time frame. So we just brought in a couple of... You're right. Let's introduce our... Oh, wait. That is weird. Hang on, folks. I get that everyone can hear me. Yes. Kenny just... Yes. That's weird. Because I can hear you. Yeah, well, I don't see any way to fix this than to shut down eCam and jump in again. Oh, wow, I hate... All right, so, folks, for those of you who can hear me, I'm just going to talk without these guys then pretty much for the whole time. Let me jump into here. Can people hear them now? Go ahead and talk a little bit, guys.
Testing.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Anybody out there?
Wow.
Ha.
Oh, nope. We can't hear anyone except Tom. All right.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's the whole 20...
Some people can hear us, I guess, right? I mean,
I could go get my wife. She has some basic sign language skills, if that's what you need.
All right, so the sound is
Okay.
here now, but it's not on this window. No, that's because...
You can hear them!
That's
Says
because I
you
moved...
there.
oh.
That's because I
my
moved to
goodness.
this... I moved to this window, and it's hearing
That's a much
the
better
people
window.
through the audio. Well,
Oh, okay.
alrighty. Well, I
Happy days,
apologize,
you're here
folks.
again.
That is some major technical problems, and I don't know what the problem is. It's something with Skype. So I'm not sure what the deal is with Skype.
Skype is always a good scapegoat.
Skype is a good scapegoat.
Yep. Let's just do an hour on Skype and how much better it used to be before Microsoft bought them out.
Sure.
Alrighty. Well, either way, folks, there we go. You're just going to look at a small here as we look at the board games because this is the only window the sound is going to work in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All right, so let's introduce ourselves again. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Z Garcia. Hi.
I'm Richard Ham, also known as Rahdo.
And I'm Travis Oates.
So if you don't know Rahdo, he runs a YouTube channel called Rahdo Runs Through. Goes through and talks about games, and you can watch and see them and hear him thinking in real time.
For better or for worse.
Travis Oates is Above Board, which is a TV show soon to be coming to somewhere near you.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
do we have an update on that, Travis?
Well, the world's been a little topsy-turvy right now, so nothing concrete.
All right.
All right. Well, either way, let's take a look at the year 2019. So the year 2019 had a lot of games come out, and every year when the year's over, people say this was a great, phenomenal year, or this year was terrible, which I'm always a little confused about because I feel like people who say the year is terrible didn't play games that year. So, I mean, I might be wrong on that, but that just seems like that's what the case would be. But I think it's safe to say there was one game that dominated the whole year. So we're here looking at Board Game Geek. I listed the games that came out over the year by the number of people who voted on them. And the number one game here has 3 times the number 2 games ranking, 29,000 rankings for Wingspan.
Yeah.
It just swept the Board Game Geek Awards. It won the Spiel des Jahres, or the Kenner Spiel des Jahres, in 2019. It came out at the very beginning of the year, so it did have the advantage of being there the whole year through. And I don't know if it's the first, and it's not the first blockbuster game designed by a female, but it's certainly the first designer blockbuster, maybe, because we already had Quirkle and, Maurice Harron designed a lot of games that have sold hundreds of thousands of copies.
Yeah.
Right.
So, thoughts on Wingspan?
I think coming out early in the year is largely a disadvantage for many of these awards. So it had to overcome. Yeah, it had to overcome actually coming out early in the year and stay relevant. But I mean, Wingspan had no trouble doing that whatsoever, of staying relevant, of being both a critical darling and an extreme success financially. I mean, Wingspan is a great, fantastic game. Came out at the right time because it really stuck the landing, and I've had a blast with it personally. It's definitely, I think it's undeniable that it needs to be not just part of this conversation, but clearly at the very beginning of this conversation about 2019.
And it wasn't one of those games that slowly gained ground, that came out, and then over time it came out big, and it stayed big the whole year. Because I had the same feeling that you did. I thought, well, it's unfortunate it came out in January because we probably won't be thinking about it too much in December. But man, that wasn't the case. It was like a boulder rolling downhill, and it just never let up.
To draw a comparison to Res Arcana, another fantastic, phenomenal card game that came out early in the year. I think it's an amazing title, and I'm sure we'll talk about it soon. But did not hold on to the limelight. Never really quite got into people's skulls and became part of the board game zeitgeist, like Wingspan. I mean, both Tom and I, independently of each other, labeled it one of the most influential games of the last 10 years because of just how insanely popular breakthrough it is. And and like Tom said, it's reflected in winning all of the awards. I think people were shocked it didn't win Best Podcast. That was a fairly common joke. And I'm looking forward to seeing how many of the awards it sweeps for the Dice Tower. Tom, do you have any early guesstimates on that based on early voting?
We haven't done that yet. But I will say that I always have guesses, but I keep those to myself. It also, I mean, he recently released the fact that it sold 300,000 copies.
Jeez.
I know that when it first came out, we kind of laughed about. He said he had made a print run, it sold out. He made another print run, it sold out. We're like, come on now, you should make bigger print runs. But if it sold 300,000, I can see why. Because you can't print 300,000 of any game, and assuming it will sell. It's just not necessarily going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, 300,000, that's getting out of board game numbers and into the low tier of video game numbers.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculously huge.
Why do you think it was so big? I mean, it was a good game. But what do you think it was about that game that made it the game of the year?
Well, without taking away from Elizabeth at all in this regard,
sure.
Jamie Stegmaier is a master of hype, as demonstrated by the fact that the number 2 game is also his, Tapestry. He's really good at controlling the perception of his game. And I don't mean it, this sounds slightly negative. I don't mean it to be so. He's just really good at promoting his game.
He's a master. Yeah.
He also produced a fantastic product. Now, that being said, give a lot of credit to the designer. It's a solid game, and the theme really strong, and it's one I think that appeals to more people than board gamers would imagine it does. For every person who goes, birds are stupid, there's a lot of people out there who won't play Res Arcana because it's Dungeons and Dragons and they have no interest in that.
Yep.
Yes.
In fact, when it first came out, I think a lot of people thought that the theme was going to limit its success and its popularity because, bird watching. Didn't seem like the most dynamic, but I think you're right. I think it was the exact opposite. I think it was such a different, never seen a board game about birds and bird, it wasn't the 50th space game that year. It wasn't the 4,000th, fantasy game put out. It felt different. And also I think it appealed to folks outside of the board game universe. I know that my mom saw us playing it, and she was like, "What's this?" And she was really interested in playing the game.
Right.
And it really seemed to capture people who were outside of the hardcore group, would see it played on the table and would, get interested in it. So
yeah, that's hugely important, because it's not like 300,000 board game geeks picked up this game.
Right.
To get to those numbers, you have to go well beyond our little pool into the wider ocean. And I do think, that's a testament to Jamie and his ability. I mean, when my wife pointed out to me, she saw on Facebook that there was an article about Wingspan in Better Homes and Gardens. That is so far beyond what your Ticket to Rides even achieve in terms of, zeitgeist impact. But, so there's the one side. But for us, I mean, I'm going to consider all of us, more of the hardcore geeky side. You cannot dismiss the fact that this is really Stonemeyer's big follow-up to Scythe. And so it was riding on a wave of love and enthusiasm and excitement for Stonemeyer. I mean, if anything, it's interesting. Charterstone, which did actually come out between the two, didn't quite capture people's imagination in the same way. So again, you got to give so much credit to the design of Wingspan. And Elizabeth did such an amazing job. Can't wait to see her next game, in fact. And the other thing I think is really important, I mean, you see it not in the first print run, but the second reprint run, that they very quickly packaged the game so that when you open it up, it is designed to be played by muggles.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. It's
even though I'm not as rude to non-gamers as Richard is, muggles.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before this becomes
talk about it for another hour, but
the Wingspan hour, let's jump to the next game, Tapestry, which has had more hype than I've ever seen a game get, I think, in the last 10 years.
What about Wingspan, though? That had a lot of hype. We should talk about that.
But that's the thing, though.
Talk about how Wingspan built the hype for
Tapestry.
Tapestry.
That is true.
Which is certainly
true, Richard. That's true.
But Wingspan did not have the hype. Okay, I remember when I got Wingspan, I hadn't even heard of it. When Jamie told me about it, I hadn't heard about it. Tapestry, you would have to be not on the internet to not hear about it.
Yes.
And there were people who were rating it 10s before it even came out because they were that excited about it.
Well, that happens a lot, so let's not
That's
go
true.
there.
That's true. But what I'm saying is at the end of the day, Wingspan settled in 19. Tapestry's at 258, which is no small feat, right? It's still pretty high up there. But it's not going to reach Wingspan by a mile. In fact, as we talk about the end of the year, we mostly talk about Tapestry because, that's the other game. It's been eclipsed by Wingspan, but it also isn't going to, I don't think, will have the lasting effect Wingspan did.
Well, it'll certainly probably go down as most controversial game of 2019, I think.
Tapestry, you think?
Oh, yeah. Well, amongst the board game Illuminati, the hardcore, it is such a Marmite game. You love it or you hate it. Yeah. And, so many people are ready to rip it apart because of perceived balance issues and because Stonemeyer said, hey, you know what? We've taken another look at it and we want to do some post-release balance to some of the classes. And while Terra Mystica does that years ago and gets lauded, it's not at all uncommon to see people saying, oh, that Tapestry is a piece of garbage. They should have kept it for another 5 years of testing before they released it. And as a former video game developer, I don't know that I agree with that.
Got it. Well, either way, I think it was fine. No, I'm sorry. I disagree with that. I'm sorry. I disagree with that.
Here we go!
No. I agree with the people on this one.
A popcorn at.
No, look. I get that you cannot balance a game perfectly before it comes out. But Tapestry wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. There were some factions in there that you now start with, 45 points? Come on. That's not a minor fix.
What do you have to say about that, Rahdo?
I think there are factions in that game It's a really interesting thing, and you see this in other games, but probably nowhere near as much as we've seen in Tapestry. One of the reasons it's so controversial. There are often factions in a largely asymmetrical game where, wow, this one is so insanely overpowered. And it's not that it's more powerful, it's that it is easier to use. It supports strategies that are a bit more on the surface. And experts at the game will be able to say, this other one can compete, but you have to do this really complex, elaborate thing. Like I just covered Z. I mean, you'll know this. The Japanese expansion, the Japanese island expansion for Empires of the North. Yeah. And one of those two factions is so insanely outside the realm of how that game works. And it's a very cool faction. And you can do amazing things with it, but it's so hard to leverage. I think a big portion of that is what goes on with Tapestry as well. But Tom, that's my opinion. And I should say, Tapestry I played more than any other game last year.
I'm going to tag in Travis. Go for it.
Yes.
Oh, no. I enjoyed Tapestry. I did not play the game before the adjustments were made. Mm-hmm. So I've only played the game.
You played it after it was fixed.
Yeah, well, I don't know that it was broken, but I only played the altered version. And I had a ball with it. So the only issue that I had with the game was a production issue, and I thought it was odd that the buildings didn't fit exactly into the spaces, which made it. We made some mistakes, I think, when we were playing by putting the wrong buildings in the spaces. That was a little confusing. Yeah. But other than that, I mean, I really enjoyed playing it.
On that note,
that is an odd production gaffe. From
that was a strange.
Which is otherwise so.
Usually his stuff is produced to the T, and that was an odd error to make, but other than that, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was, for me, it's a very lightweight game. It wasn't. I think maybe some people were expecting a more complex strategy game. For me, it was a lighter game, but I really had fun with it. So
I think that's a problem that just comes along with the hype, right? I mean, that's the thing. You build this hype. People know he made Sai. They consider that to be a deep, engaging, richly layered game. Not to say that Tapestry isn't, but it comes out as slightly lighter than people expect it to be. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it floats away light, right? That's just how that goes. That's the expectation versus what you get. I've played it. I enjoyed it. I'm just messing around about the whole balance thing. I'm glad that they made changes that they perceived needed to be made. That's great. Yeah. I will agree about the buildings.
I think it's more important that the audience laud a developer that acknowledges that there were issues and takes steps to address them rather than chewing them out for it, quite frankly.
Well, sure. Absolutely. I don't argue that. Tom. I'm just saying that, no, I'm not chewing them out. I'm just saying that was a thing. We can't pretend that that's not a thing.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I do think that, I mean, obviously it's more difficult if it's a video game, it's very easy to patch and make those alterations and not have it affect the user. Obviously, when you're making changes to something that's printed and in front of you, that's more problematic. I know that a lot of the Kickstarter games, there are some companies out there, the Too Many Bones guys in particular, that every time they do a revision of it, they send the material to all the folks who Kickstarted it. I really appreciate that. It's one of the reasons why I've been consistent always kickstarting their games, because when they make changes, they send me the actual physical things, no cost to me. It's on their dime. Hopefully, if they do they don't really do Kickstarter, so they have that kind of a mailing list. But I would like to have the ability to buy the new components, I guess, for that. That would be nice, so that I don't have to have a sheet there, but that's the nature of board games, I guess.
It seems inevitable that there will be an expansion for Tapestry, and I would certainly hope at the very least it comes with stickers that you can apply retroactively to your boards.
Yeah.
That's a decent fix. Yeah, that's a decent fix. It's better than nothing.
I would be happy with that.
All right. Then we've solved the internet. Hooray.
All right, so first 20 minutes, we talk about two games. All right, let's switch tacks and talk briefly about a company here, because the next game in this list here is Tiny Towns, But also farther down the list is Point Salad. So I think it's safe to say AEG 2019 was the second year of their experiment where they were going to make fewer games and try to make them games that everybody played. And there was no question their push for Tiny Towns was huge. And they're still pushing Tiny Towns. They're following the North Star thing where they take one game and just talk about it. Although I would argue at the end of the day, I think Point Salad has been played more times, if only because it takes 10 minutes. But I think that I'm super happy with what AEG has done. High quality, family-friendly games, easy to play. Sometimes with some deep, Tiny Towns definitely has some depth to it.
It's got some crunch. It's a lovely. It's a perfect, gateway style game that gives you depth that will keep you coming back. And yeah, it made my top 10 of the year easily. I love it so much. And you're right. I mean, so much credit to AEG for charting this new path that I think really the industry as a whole could learn from. Fewer games polished to a higher shine is best for everybody. It used to be the domain of days of wonder, but I would love to see more of that attitude moving forward from everybody.
And I think
it's a bit of a riskier proposition for them, because if one of their 4 games a year is not a hit, does not gain any traction, suddenly they're in financial trouble, right? There is that. It's, the shotgun approach of just sort of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks is a little safer, perhaps. But I agree. I mean, I think it's a bold move to go, you know what? We are producing a bunch of mediocre games. We are flooding the market with mediocrity. Let's back up. Let's put out fewer games that we consider to be better, and people hopefully will follow us in that belief. And I think it's working out for them.
And I think you really notice the companies that are doing that. There are a few companies that have really pared down and are just concentrating on a couple of titles. And I agree with Rahdo 100%. I wish more companies were doing that. There's a few companies in particular that I really wish were doing that, because I think they're hurting their brand. I think they're hurting their brand by putting out too many games, and too many of them are not necessarily bad, but just deeply mediocre. Games that I get in that are like these huge productions, and I play them once and I go, okay. And I don't think I'm ever going to play them again. And these are games that, retail probably for $120, Kickstarter all in for, $300. And you play them once and you just have no interest in playing them after that. And it's disappointing. I would much rather, that they'd made 2 of them, made them really great, Yeah.
But that wasn't all AEG did. And dovetailing off of that, I got to give a huge shout out. I don't know if we're going to get to it. Edge of Darkness, also from AEG, is a amazing, over the top. Let's throw everything we can into a ginormous box full of content. And it's a brilliant design, basically the heir apparent to their Mystic Vale series. And to Z's point about, the risks inherent in going with a smaller scope for your release schedule, that's where Kickstarter comes in. I mean, a game like Edge of Darkness couldn't exist without Kickstarter. And in fact, they only sell it direct through Kickstarter because the cost of goods for them is so incredibly high. Sure. I thought that was a very exciting experiment for them too. And personally, I'm a fan of it. More publishers could stand to take fewer risks or to ameliorate that risk so they can focus on quality instead of quantity. And Kickstarter can be a really good ally in that.
And I also
on that I agree with you.
I know Tom didn't like it, but I loved that game. That for me was the best of the Mystic Vale style games to date. I loved that game.
I'm going to argue that Mystic Vale is the best of the Mystic Vale style games, but all right.
I'm going to go with Gloom. Good old
No, you're not.
games.
No, you're not. You can't even say that with a straight face. Come on now. All right. So we mentioned Fantasy Flight, so let's jump into them. Their most played game was Lord of the Rings Journey to the Middle-earth. However, Marvel Champions, the card game, came out at the end of the year, and at the rate that one is selling out everywhere, will probably be the highest one. They also did Star Wars Outer Rim, very, very popular Star Wars game. Those are the 3 biggest ones I'm seeing on here. Fantasy Flight has settled down into mostly IPs at this point, and specifically Star Wars, Game of Thrones, and now they have Marvel now, for sure. Oh, they had Lord of the Rings here.
Fantasy Flight Games is a very different entity, or, now, and was a very different entity in 2019 that they were, let's even say, 2015, right? They've become a company, a brand, a machine designed to put out these games based on whatever intellectual property they've got their hands on. That's not to say that what they're putting out is garbage. Very much the opposite, in fact. So I'm glad they're there, because the alternative is somebody else with very little investment in Star Wars, who does not care about the source material. They would be putting out the Star Wars game. They would probably be Drek. So I'm glad they're doing it. But I would be lying if I did not say a part of me is saddened to no longer see that Fantasy Flight sheen and high level of art and precision on projects that are not based on the Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, because I do miss it. I think they made interesting games. I didn't like all of them by any means, but there was something about a Fantasy Flight game, before they were all IPs, that was enjoyable, that was interesting, that was captivating at the very least. So a lot of these games from them I just haven't played lately because, I'm not that big into the intellectual properties that they're producing these based on. But
yeah, they had that brief window where they were, hey, let's bring back our Knizia classics and give them a huge overhaul. Yeah. And that was awesome. And now that seems to have gone the way of the dodo completely.
Well, not really. It's just that company, that part of the company, they merged into Z-Man.
Well, they were reworking a lot of things. It was Windrider was a studio that came and went, right? I mean, Windrider was around for less than
the guy
a year.
who runs Windrider is now running Z-Man. So
and
it's kind of a.
I think you really hit the key there. I think that once they became part of Asmodee, I think they did a restructuring, and they're continuing to restructure, where I think Fantasy Flight became that borrowed IP part of Asmodee.
Right.
And a lot of the games that you're talking about, Z, I think were funneled to other properties and other companies.
Sure.
I think the only original IP they still use is, I think they're still making games in the Twilight Imperium universe. I think that's still an IP that they've held on to, and that I think there are some things in the pipeline.
That's their own thing, right? Yeah.
That's still their own original IP. But other than that one title or one universe, I think you're right. I think they're all.
I'm certainly hoping to see some more Runebound stuff, because Runebound 3rd Edition.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Once that first expansion came out, it left me hungry for more, definitely. Yeah. Enough about Fantasy Flight as a whole. Tom, you, like me, are a lifelong Marvel fan. Why was Marvel Champions not in your top 10 of the year? Answer the question.
Man, so rude. No, you know what it is I didn't play it enough.
That's being direct.
Yes.
You animal. That's being rude.
Thank you. He's always there to clarify for me. Now, I liked it. It's fine. It just didn't make my top 10. I love Marvel, but I don't know. The game is, and even now I've played it some more. It's fun, but it's very mechanical, and I don't mind that. I don't mind that. It's just that the Marvel part isn't swinging me through. And even one of my favorite games, Dice Masters, the Marvel, the theme is kind of in the background. I feel the same way here. I still like it.
I think a lot of Fantasy Flight games are mechanical. I think it's a good way to describe them, actually.
Sure, but I've heard things.
Many of them feel that way.
I've heard that, for example, I haven't played Star Wars Outer Rim, but I heard that it's very thematic.
That does not exclude being mechanical.
But wouldn't you say, Z, that because Marvel Champions is essentially a living card game, wouldn't you say that some of the other living card games have more story in them? Definitely.
They do, absolutely. I think
because that's what I enjoy about the living card games the most, and that's what I kind of missed with Marvel Champions, is there wasn't some kind of a interesting, story or interesting, comic book scenario that was happening there. I agree with Tom to a certain extent that for me it just seemed very mathy and very mechanical, which was fine. It felt like an extended combat, but it didn't feel like there was any story in it at all.
That's true, and I definitely agree with you. But compared to the most, because I've played it the most, is the Arkham Horror living card game. I think there's a lot more story in that game. I do not think it's any less mechanical. That game has a serious amount of manipulating bits and bobs and upkeep and various steps. There are a lot of gears. It's a very mechanical game. And so is Marvel Champions. I think they just needed more story to balance it out.
It's not that
you
it's
know
overly
what I mean?
mechanical. It's that the mechanics are laid bare a bit more,
right?
Because there's less thematic chrome around it. Now, of course, that's in theory what they're going to be addressing with the Red Skull expansion that, fingers crossed, is coming out in the next few months. And that really kind of follows the pattern they did with Lord of the Rings, the card game, a million years ago, because the base box of that just comes with 3 missions that are very loosely tied together, but give it time, and you can see how rich the storytelling is in that series now. And I fully expect that for Marvel. And they were just testing the waters, dipping their toe in.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, the next game on the list here, we've already talked about quite a bit, Res Arcana, but that's like the little game that could. New company.
Yeah.
I mean, established designer, but it's a new company, a theme that looked a little generic. Well, is generic, I shouldn't say a little generic. And yet the game has gotten quite a bit of love.
Yeah, I am happy it's so high on this list, quite frankly. Well done, Board Game Geek.
Yeah, I adore it. I think it's a fantastic game. It's nice to see a game, a company, a designer not feel the need, not feel the tug of needing more, needing bloat, needing to offer more than seems necessary, and giving in to that temptation. It's nice to see that restraint, I guess. This is a game that it's a small box. It's not a lot of components. You have a deck of cards that has 8 cards in it, if I'm not mistaken. That's it. And what it does with that is spectacular. It's engaging. It's tense, fantastic turn angst and rising tension and all these things you want in a good gaming experience.
Yeah.
This could have easily been the kind of game in less hands that becomes about unlocking another 50 cards and having avatars that, level up and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things that ultimately you don't need.
It could have been an Edge of Darkness, which we mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So I appreciate it for those things quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a textbook example of doing more with less. And that's an incredible design feat to pull off when it boils right down to it. And all I'll say is, I've said it before, and it's very ridiculous, but as far as I'm concerned, it's Tom Lehman's greatest design. I mean, I put it above Race for the Galaxy, just in pure elegance and perfection.
I've got no popcorn to throw at the screen for that filthy lie.
I think I might agree with that, Tom.
Oh, yeah, baby. And
I think it's my favorite game from him. Race for the Galaxy is great. I like it more than the other Galaxy games in that line, but it feels a little tired by now. It feels a little bloated. All those things I was talking about. Res Arcana is like a master at work. It's like someone chiseling out of a chunk of. I don't know.
All right,
material
let's move on to the next game.
You're saying it's his David. It's his Michelangelo's David.
That's what I'm saying. That Marvel has been chiseled away to something very simple,
Yeah.
I will also say one thing about Res Arcana. I think it's the perfect example of a lot of people get caught up in that Kickstarter is the way that all board game development is going to go and so forth. And Res Arcana is not a Kickstarter game. It wouldn't exist in that Kickstarter universe. And I'm so glad that it exists. I'm glad that we don't only have Kickstarter as a way to make games. And I'm glad that there are companies out there that are still making these smaller, like you said, tight, not overly bloated games, because it was a real gem and it wouldn't exist in that kind of a market. Yeah. So it's nice to see that we still have that variety.
Yeah, whatever you think about it, amazing first inaugural freshman title for Sandcastle Games. And they are definitely going to be a publisher to watch.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, we can't spend time forever on some games. So I'm going to list off a bunch of games. And if you want to make some comments on some of these, because I have some other games I want to get to talk about. So we have Paladins of the West Kingdom, Cartographers, Taverns of Tiefenthal, and Barrage. Barrage is what brings us together today. Of those, Paladins is the highest rated. It's a sequel to Architects, and definitely will have people argue over which one is better. I'm sorry, did I mispronounce it? Architects. There you go. Get off my case. I pronounce it that way. I always get in trouble for the way I pronounce architects.
Oh, because you say architects instead of architects?
It's a Pennsylvania thing, I hope.
Oh, that's okay. They're both very good. That's a good argument for the company and the designer to have. Which of my two games is better? That's
yeah, totally. Go quick round robin. I assume all three of us or all four of us have played both of them. I go for architects over paladins. Anyone else?
That's my pick too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. Probably
paladins. That being said,
I'd like to be the odd man out every time. You
know what? I can turn off your camera. I'm just saying, I have the power.
Well, you did earlier. People couldn't hear me.
I know, and then people complained. All right, cartographers, quick shout out to them. Congratulations on the Kennerspiel.
Yes.
That's a huge thing for this small company to get.
Yes.
And Taverns did not get the love that Quacks did. It's essentially the sequel to that, although some people like it a lot more. I'm not one of them. All right, but I want to talk about two games that I think are really great for the industry as a whole, both gateway-style games and both in different arenas. One, Horrified, which hit the mass market arena, and the other, Parks, which came through the Kickstarter arena. But both these games, highly lauded across the board by everybody, both really easy to teach, both very different themes, but really strong implementation of those themes, even if Parks is mostly the artwork of, but you know.
Yeah. Both gorgeous productions as well.
Was your reaction to Horrified similar to mine in that when I played it, I thought this game is way better than it should be? Like, when I first heard about this, based on Universal Monsters and the whole idea, I thought, boy, that sounds like that's going to be terrible. It just felt like it was one of those IPs that they got a hold of and just made something really awful out of. And the whole time I'm playing the game, I'm thinking, wow, this is actually really enjoyable. I'm really enjoying this game. And I did not expect to at all. Didn't expect to enjoy that game at all. Very pleasant surprise for me.
I feel the same way. I don't think I was at that point, I already knew to watch out for Prospero Hall in a good way because they knew what they were doing, right? Prospero Hall just seems to be really making interesting games. They're not all great, but they're all they all deserve a look. They're all interesting. Prospero Hall, by the way, is a conglomerate of designers, so this is one of the other big games this year that came out in 2019 that was co-designed by several women. So really interesting stuff. And I just found it to be captivating, man. I agree. The theme didn't, I wasn't going into it thinking, ooh, finally, those Universal monsters. Yeah.
Right.
But I came out of it loving it. I mean, I rate this game a 9 out of 10. I just checked right now. I really like it. It's absolutely interesting and captivating and engaging. And yet, I played this with my young nephew and my mother. And both of them not gamers, right? And they had a blast. It definitely bridges those generations, those gaps in gaming, knowledge. It's great.
Z.
All right.
Wait. I have a question for Z, because you're my brother from another mother when it comes to pandemic love. You and I are the two that both rated our number one game of all time. I have to admit, I have not played Horrified. It's definitely been on my list of games to try, but I've always looked at it, and I've been worried that, it doesn't quite have the same depth of a pandemic or a pandemic style, putting out lots of fires all over the place game. And it looks to me like it's around the same level as, what's the fireman game, Tom, that I know you love?
Flashpoint Fire Rescue.
Flashpoint Fire Rescue. Would you equate it relative to Pandemic in that same area as Flashpoint?
Sure, I would. Yeah, I would say comparing this to Pandemic, I would say Horrified is slightly more repetitive. So you might burn out a little more if you play it in quick succession too many times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The fires you need to put out in Pandemic are more diverse than the fires you need to put out in Horrified, okay?
Yeah.
What about
But I compared it
Forbidden
the one
Desert?
that yeah.
Okay.
I compared it in my head. When I first played, I compared it to Witch of Salem. Richard, I don't know if you've played that.
Yes, I have.
And this is very much like a Witch of Salem, but I thought Horrified was better.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Like I said, I've really been looking at it for quite a while. I really need to reach out to Ravensburger, I think.
Yeah.
All right, then on the Euro game side of things, almost hitting the top 100, Maracaibo was pretty high.
Yes.
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 Really,
Number one game of the year, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow.
So phenomenal. And Tom, you know, when you made fun of me about some of my narrative choices when we did our most innovative thing in Vegas, this was the one I wanted to put on the list.
Okay.
Because I think people will, years from now, look back and say, Maracaibo and how Alexander Pfister integrated narrative in a meaningful way into a really solid, top-end, heavy Euro. I think that is going to be the blueprint for a lot of games moving forward. And I
would like to argue that people aren't going to say that now, let alone the future. Come on now.
Yeah, I'm Babe Ruth style calling it right.
No way.
Where do you fall? But Maracaibo, Great Western Trail. Where you?
They're both excellent games. I definitely enjoy Maracaibo more. One, because it's got incredible speed. Great Western Trail is, it's kind of appropriate to the theme. It's meandering as you slowly work your way with your cattle up to whatever, Kansas City. Whereas Maracaibo, it is fast. It is an epic race because you don't have much time before that rondelle is finished. But that, plus the narrative integration, I think is a crucial evolution. And you'll be apologizing 5 years from now, Tom, when you have to admit that, yes, If
it's general acclaim that the story part of Maracaibo has had any lasting effect at all, other than on Rahdo and his family, I will. Yes, I'll apologize. Okay. Let's jump into sequels. 2 sequels here. Twice as Clever and Azul Summer Pavilion. Both of these did not get the praise of their predecessors, but at the same time, it's because they were very, very similar for both games. I think Summer Pavilion.
I don't know about that. I think Twice as Clever, certainly. Twice as Clever almost, feels almost like the same game. To the point that you start to wonder where that line gets drawn between expansion and sequel, between artistic endeavor and cash grab, right? I disagree that I would say those things about Azul Summer Pavilion. Azul Summer Pavilion definitely feels like its own beast. It's engaging. It's different from the previous 2. It's got a different cadence, different things to worry about. Still very engaging. I think it's neat that all the Azul games, you could change the order in which they came out, and not a lot would change. That's interesting. That's rare. You know what I mean? Because usually it's, the people like this, so we must make the advanced heavy version. Or, people like this, so we must make the dice game. You know what I mean? Azul and the line of games doesn't suffer from that. They're all great on their own, in a vacuum, not in a vacuum, side by side. That's fantastic.
Which did you prefer? If you could only have one, would it be Summer Pavilion or the original?
I think the second.
Oh, really?
Like Stained Glass of Sintra.
I agree.
Wow.
Stained Glass is my favorite too.
Okay.
All right, then the next game is not technically, in my opinion, a 2019 game. It came out in German in 2019. It came out in English 2020. So most people haven't even played it yet, but it's still high on the list here, and that's The Crew.
Yes. And technically, the best kind of technically, this is a 2019 game. And, yeah, it's amazing.
Well, 2019, not in English, though.
It was such a big deal. It kind of harkened back to the early days of modern Euros where people were trying to import their own copies of Settlers of Catan and making their own mimeographed printouts because they were just so keen on playing this thing. I haven't seen that in a long, long time, that The Crew brought in so many people. The first time I played Crew, it was a German import with just a cheap printout that the owner had literally typed up herself because there wasn't one available at that time. There's so much passion and excitement around a co-op trick-taking game. Go figure.
And what blew me away about The Crew is, like, how many hundreds of years have trick-taking games been around? Like, hundreds and hundreds, right? It's amazing that you're still seeing an innovation that feels like it completely changes trick-taking games. Like, I mean, I don't think I have been blown away by a tiny card game as much as The Crew. And when I sat down and played it for the first time, I played with Tom for the first time. He taught me how to play it. It just felt completely different. I had to rewire my brain to play it properly because my trick-taking brain was working against me at every turn, trying to tell me, no, don't do that, don't do that.
Yep.
And I loved it. And because you can play it in like 5 minutes, you can sit down with a group and just, you know, I think I spent 2 hours with a group of people just playing this because we got so focused and we wanted to beat this thing and everything. And I haven't experienced that with a trick-taking game before, where I was, you know, just jazzed to play a trick-taking game like this. I kudos to them to coming up with and it's not a real complex change. It's a very simple change. I can't believe nobody ever thought of it before. But man, what a neat alteration to something that we've seen a million times before. I loved The Crew. I really, really, really dug it.
Wow.
And for the record, a phenomenal 2-player implementation too. Another insane rarity. The idea of a trick-taking game that works well for couples, for 2 players. My wife and I really enjoyed it. And played that way, it is a fantastic tool to introduce gamers to the ideas and the rhythms of trick-taking, because I'm not a trick-taker. They're really kind of opaque to me. And the first time I played The Crew was as, I think, a 4 or 5 player game, and I just felt like I was completely out of my depth. But when we got it back home, and just Jen and I could play it as a 2-player game, and it was a more gentle, introduction, it was fantastic. And now I feel like I'm ready to not be a total idiot when I try to save the ship working with all my crewmates.
Crew, get me from being a total idiot. All right.
Yes.
All right, let's jump through a bunch of other games here. We have Villagers, Escape Plan. Great theme, but definitely the least popular I've seen of a Lacerda game in a while.
Oh, really?
Well, no, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it didn't get the same praise the other ones did.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, following off of Lisboa, which was by far his heaviest, biggest game, I think maybe hardcore Lacerda fans were like, oh, this is for babies, kind of a thing. I wonder if that was maybe an issue I ran into. Obviously, it's not. It's still a big, rich, heavy game. Yeah.
All right. Then one of the biggest Kickstarters ever was released last year, Tainted Grail. Tainted Grail is still, you're probably not hearing so much about it because people are probably still playing it. There's quite a bit of content in that game.
People are still unboxing it, I think.
And we should talk a little bit just about Awaken Realms in general, because Nemesis came out in 2019 as well. And
it did? It must have a different date.
I believe Nemesis came out I think I got it in 2019. Early 2019, I think it delivered. But Awaken Realms, I think.
Okay, I reviewed it December 24th, 2018. So we'll call it
it's one of those right on the edge games.
Right.
Yeah.
I think Awaken Realms is turning into the next big. Every single game that they've put out, I have really, really enjoyed, and they are, the poster child for what we were talking about with Kickstarter. I mean, they put everything into it, and there's a million, little expansions that they add and everything. But man, I really look forward to getting an Awaken Realms game now. Like Tainted Grail, I thought had the best story of 2019. I mean, for me, that was I was especially impressed because I'm a writer for a living mostly. I was impressed how good the writing was in the game, because a lot of the time, even if it's a good story, the writing itself is not the greatest writing. But man,
better than Maracaibo?
Huh?
You shut your mouth.
But man, I thought that the story itself was extremely well written. But yeah, I think. What do you guys think about Awaken Realms?
I think they're the new. Come on.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh yeah. My first thought is, based on what you just said, how can you be excited about their next one? Because how could you have gotten more than 5% into the current one you have, let alone the last one that came before it? Because you're right, they are so big and so endless. You've got easily 3 years of gameplay in any one of their titles.
Well, no. That's not the case. Lords of Hellas is an actual game. It has a lot of extra content.
Enough.
You don't have to put that in.
I was thinking more of, Tainted Grail and Ether Fields,
And they also did Edge Dawnfall, which is a really great strategic miniatures game.
That's true.
I mean,
Yeah.
All right.
And this War of Mine, of course. I can't forget that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the game that's the lowest ranked one I have on these lists as we go through, and that's Llama, nominated for the Spiel des Jahres in a moment of insanity by the judges.
Yes.
Whatever.
Would anybody like to make a spirited defense of Llama?
No, not particularly.
Okay.
I tried. I put it multiple times. I was like, what am I missing? I got to be missing something. Anyhow. All right. Hadara got a lot of buzz early in the year. It's probably one of those very popular Euro games which we're not going to hear about much in the future, but I liked it a lot.
Yeah, me too.
It's very well done.
Draftosaurus is a nice little drafting game with a little wooden dinosaurs. Good filler that got a lot of buzz.
Did it? I was going to say, talk about a shame of a game that got overlooked. I didn't think it really picked up very much traction, and I think it's great.
It's $8.93 on Board Game Geek, I feel like.
Yeah,
well,
okay,
maybe.
fair enough.
It's a Wonderful
It deserves
World
more.
Was a Kickstarter game. I don't know how much retail presence It's a Wonderful World has. I know they made a version for retail, but a lot of people like this one, very Race for the Galaxy adjacent style game.
Yeah. Phenomenal game. One of the best engine builders in years, easily.
The Isle of Cats is on the list here for 2019, folks, but I'm sorry, that is clearly a 2020 game. That came out spring.
I normally disagree with you, Tom, but on this one, I agree. I actually lobbied the designer, please, Frank, switch it to 2020. I know Board Game Geek themselves lobbied him saying, let us change it to 2020. But he's like, nope, there's this one retail outlet in China that had it for sale on December 28th, so it's a 2019 game.
Yeah, but he's going to hurt himself when it comes time for 2020 because we're going to forget the game came out.
This would be up for awards probably if it was 2020, but yeah.
That's a strange argument to make as the designer, but okay.
Yeah.
All right, Cthulhu Death May Die. Isn't that also not a 2020 game? Or is that 2019?
Gosh, I don't know. Maybe. It's tricky with these Kickstarters and when they deliver, where's that? Is the first person gets it? Is it when the last person gets it? I don't know. I'm not sure.
No, I think that was 2019 because I remember confronting Eric Lang at PAX about Death May Die and asking him if he had ever won it. And he laughed at me and evilly. Well, it must have come out in 2019.
That giant miniature came out early because I remember seeing people walk around in July at Dice Tower Con with it.
Oh yeah, that came out. The giant miniature came out in 2018. You got that giant miniature like a year before you got the actual game. It's very
well. All right, then we have Imperial Settlers: Empires of the North, the sequel that's not kind of a sequel. It's kind of a 2.0. I like it better than Imperial Settlers.
I don't think I would even call it that.
It's definitely a sequel.
It is. I don't think it's a 2.0. I don't think it's necessarily like a reworking. It's another game in the same universe. You know what I mean?
It's a spin-off. Is what
yeah. It's a bit of a spin-off, and I'm glad that on the box they even have something that we often sort of wished companies would do, is not have it say Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North, which makes it look like an expansion. Yeah. But it is Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North is what the game is called, So I think it's great. It's a fantastic design. It's one of my favorite games of the year, if not my favorite game of the year. It is robust, engaging. It takes a lot of, what made the Imperial Settlers and 51st State before it, what made those games interesting to me. Takes another look at all these aspects and reworks many of them to give you something that feels fresh, that feels overall way more logical. That's one thing that surprised me about Empires of the North. The whole thing just feels much more logical than the previous games, And I appreciated that because it makes teaching it way easier. Things make sense. Therefore, the teach is simpler.
Yeah, the flow is overall just sharper, clearer. You don't spend so much time. Right? Does this happen before this? Right. And, okay, you guys, I don't know if you have any insight into Portal games, but I got to ask. This and the Imperial Settlers Roll and Write, what is with this sudden inclusion of really awesome, cool solo modes that make me wish, why isn't this available in the multiplayer? They did it with both of these games, and it drives me nuts.
Right.
What do you mean by,
for Roll and Write,
like the sheets in the Roll Write are different, and you wish it was that way in the multiplayer?
Well, for the Roll and Write, yes. The Roll and Write multiplayer is significantly weaker than the solo game, where you get all this great variety. And they eventually said, okay, folks, after the fact, here's some rules you can follow to be able to play the multiplayer game like the solo. And then Empires of the North comes with this cool campaign mode with like 5 chapters that change the rules. And, now we're going through an extreme plague and all kinds of cool things. I'm just wondering, is there somebody within Portal that is pushing a solo agenda? And, maybe when Ignazzi's not looking or something like that.
Did you just say go through a plague and all kinds of cool things?
Yeah.
Yes.
Plagues are great.
All right.
I don't know if there's somebody. Yes. I don't know, Richard, if there's somebody there specifically pushing a solitaire point of view towards their new games. I do know, and again, I guess I've taken this upon myself to be the one to mention this. This is yet another game co-designed by a female, Joanna Kajanka, that Portal Ignazzi has hired on as an in-house designer developer.
Oh, wow. And
she is on absolute fire. I am loving the stuff she's doing. It's so fresh. She clearly works well with Ignazzi. This is largely, from what I understand, her design. And she's also the one who put out the latest expansion to 51st State Master Set, which was, again, tremendous. So that might be it. Maybe what she's bringing to the table, maybe she is interested in solitaire play, and that could be it. But whether it's hers or not, I agree with 100%, and I am so glad she is there as a developer and designer because it's fantastic stuff.
Agreed. I need to subscribe to her on Board Game Geek now. I'm a little embarrassed that this is another thing from Ignazzi. I didn't even think about it. But
yeah, he's a co-designer on it, but her presence, I've been completely impressed. I've seen her at conventions as well. She's lovely, but so sharp, so smart. She's a rock star in this world. Yeah.
Nice. Unfortunately, at this point, I'm looking through the list, and I feel like we could spend honestly another 2 hours because there is.
Let's do it. I'm gonna go get a refill. Games. I'll be right back.
No, because I said this would be an hour, so maybe we'll have to come back.
Wait, Tom. Are you saying 2019 was a great year for games?
I think every year is a great year for games ever since 2012. I don't think there's been a bad year since 2012, and anyone who says otherwise is they're just getting too picky. I mean, really.
Yeah. Well, anyone who says otherwise is comparing to the years around it. You know what I mean? Which is valid. You could say 2016 was a down year from 2015. To say it was a bad year in gaming, I would agree with you. Those people just aren't finding the games for them. At this point, and I've said this for years, I think at this point there is no one on the planet who is not a gamer. They're just not a gamer yet because they haven't found the game that's for them. And believe me, there's a game for everybody on the planet that they absolutely adore, that sings to them. They just haven't found it. They might never find it, unfortunately. But, I think every year more games come out, and I think there's the chances of the one game getting made that are exactly for you increases. So that's what I think.
All right, before we end, is there a game that you had wanted to quick shout out, anybody, that we didn't mention?
I'd like to give a quick shout out. Another through line of 2019, great year for 2-player only games. Mandala, and the Uwe Rosenberg Robin of Locksley. And a lot of people really love that Watergate game. I haven't played it, but I hear good things. So that was really nice to see, considering
and Blitzkrieg.
Yeah. And
I'll do my shout out, much like yours, Richard, and I'll do it for reworked games. I'll do the same thing. Atlantis Rising 2nd Edition, Claustrophobia 1643, Glenmore 2, and Last Bastion Reworking Ghost Stories.
And
great stuff.
Kind of, sort of, Black Angel as well, revisiting La Trois.
I would shout out to Unmatched. That was one of my favorite games this year. That's another company that just everything that they do, I really look forward to. It seems like they've got the golden touch right now as well.
Yeah.
And Unmatched again, a game that I don't think would exist on Kickstarter. That's a game that felt to me like a smaller game that didn't need to add in the kitchen sink to make it a phenomenal game.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yeah, there's something to be said for simplicity still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll give a quick shout out to Clank Legacy. I really liked it.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of fun.
Yeah.
And also a sad shout out to Batman, which I thought would be the biggest game of the year, and nowhere close.
Well, it physically was.
That is true. That is true. I spent more time looking at Batman miniatures than ever was spent playing that game. So
I was going to say it's one of my son's favorite games because he's 6 years old and I gave him all the miniatures. So there you go, son.
All righty. Well, folks, I know that's only an hour's worth, but I guess it's best to leave people wanting more. We'll be back in the future, I'm sure. You'll see me and Rahdo together on Tuesday on his channel, Rahdo Runs Through, at 2 o'clock. Me and Z will be playing tomorrow.
2 o'clock Eastern.
2 o'clock Eastern, that's correct. Me and Z will be playing Hiroshima Hex tomorrow, so I'm going to get whooped in that game. And Travis, we'll be seeing his show someday.
Any day now.
Any day now. All right.
We're excited, man. We're excited. We can't wait.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Z Garcia.
I'm Rahdo.
Travis Oates.
Have fun gaming.
Bye.